TaxAct knows filing taxes can be confusing, so we have live experts on hand who can help answer any questions you may have. Questions like, can I claim my SUV as my home office if I answer work emails in my car? If I adopted 12 dogs this year, can I list them as dependents? And, am I doing this right, or am I doing this very, very wrong? Our experts have the answers to those questions and many others. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
The last time the Patriots and the Seahawks met in the Super Bowl, it ended with a moment that still hangs in football fans' collective memory.
21 reasons that was the worst Super Bowl call in the history of the Super Bowl. We will dissect it.
Super Bowl 49 was tense until the end. New England found themselves down by 10 in the third, then mounted a fourth-quarter comeback behind some very familiar heroics by Tom Brady.
Hey, somebody got some skills before the game, and Tom Brady looking for that fourth ring along with the always emotional Bill Belichick.
The Patriots led by 4 with 2 minutes left, and on the final drive of the game, the Seahawks made it to the 1-yard line, needing a touchdown to secure their second straight championship with arguably the best running back in the game in Marshawn Lynch.
Well, here they do. It's Marshawn Lynch who had another 100-yard effort, but he stopped just shy of the goal line, so the clock continues to run.
Then came the snap, and of course, Seattle threw the ball.
What are you doing? He gets picked off by the undrafted rookie free agent from Western Alabama.
New England cornerback Malcolm Butler picked off Russell Wilson, and with that infamous play, the Patriots claimed a 28-24 victory, their first Super Bowl in 10 whole years. It wasn't just a win. It was a reminder that championships live and die on inches, moments, and decisions that will be forever second-guessed.
The New England Patriots come back from a 10-point fourth-quarter deficit, and they win it 28-24.
That game still lives in all of our minds. When we think back on Super Bowl 49, everyone outside of New England is still yelling, "Run the ball!" And also probably still thinking about Left Shark. But with Super Bowl 60 bringing these teams together again, the stakes are layered. As much as fans and media want to push a narrative about rematches and redemption, it turns out that Super Bowl 11 years ago isn't really on the minds of the people actually playing in the game. These Patriots and these Seahawks are not the ones from a decade back. This is New England after Brady and Belichick, a franchise now seeking to establish a new chapter after probably the greatest dynasty we've ever seen, and after a rebuilding period that turned out to be much shorter than we might have thought. These aren't your mother's Patriots, and Mike Vrabel's locker room is certainly nothing like Bill Belichick's. Second-year quarterback Drake May is trying to prove that he's worth his high draft pick, that he can lead a team to a chip and silence any whispers about his youth under pressure, and succeed, probably the greatest quarterback of all time. For Seattle, Sam Darnold has been given a chance to reset his narrative once again, with a long and winding career that could transform him from draft bust to franchise quarterback. The Seahawks might be the most complete overall team in the league, with definitely one of its most formidable defenses. So as we look ahead to the Super Bowl this Sunday, this matchup is less about revenge and more about identity. Who these teams are now and who they're trying to become on the biggest stage in sports. Hey everyone, it's Kavitha Davidson, and welcome to another episode of Sportly. It's Super Bowl week, so I've invited one of my absolute favorite people to help break down what we can expect to see on Sunday, Lindsay Jones. Lindsay is a senior editor at The Ringer covering the NFL. She previously reported for The Athletic, which is where we work together, and before that, she cut her teeth at USA Today and the Denver Post. She was also the president of the Pro Football Writers of America, which, among other things, issues the end-of-the-season awards like MVP and Rookie of the Year. Lindsay is once again at the Super Bowl, this year being held in the Bay Area. And if you've ever been, trust me, Super Bowl week is absolutely insane. So we're very lucky we could snag her for an hour in between 6 a.m. shuttle buses to press conferences, interviews at practice, stops on Radio Row, and of course, making her own deadlines. So Lindsay, thank you for joining the podcast. You are in San Francisco currently, correct?
Yes, we're here for Super Bowl 60 week here in San Francisco and San Jose and Santa Clara, the full Bay Area.
Yeah, to give our listeners kind of an idea, the actual game is in Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, and that's like 50 miles away from San Francisco, which most of the rest of Super Bowl week is taking place at.
Yeah, this is one of the more unique Super Bowl experiences. And then this is the second time in kind of like modern NFL history that they've had a Super Bowl here. And you know, the NFL really wanted to make it a Bay Area Super Bowl. That's a very large geographic area. So you can walk around downtown San Francisco and it does not feel like there's a Super Bowl happening until you kind of get to the big convention center downtown. And then there's like banners and signs and street closures and stuff. But then you can get on a bus or hop on the 101 and 50 miles away and you get to the actual like football stadium where the teams are going to be staying and practicing once like the real football stuff gets going at the middle of the week.
We're gearing up for Super Bowl 60. By the time this airs, we will be a couple of days away from game day. We've got the Seahawks and the Patriots in a little bit of a rematch from Super Bowl in 2015. Just to kind of set the stage, can you break down how each of these teams got here, what their regular seasons looked like, and then the crazy playoffs we saw with both of these teams on the road to the Super Bowl?
Yeah, sure. In many ways, this is kind of like a fitting Super Bowl matchup for the way that this season played out, because fairly early on in the season, we kind of saw that like this year was going to be weird. There were some kind of like interesting results. You know, the Chiefs, who have been to the Super Bowl year after year after year, they lost in week one. And it was like, oh, maybe their kind of luck is turning and maybe something different is going to happen here. So I'll look at the Seahawks first, the NFC champions. In many ways, they were kind of the best and most complete team for the bulk of the season. They were, if you're following power rankings and that kind of stuff, they stumbled a little bit in week one. But then after that, you could just see that they have the best defense in the league, really good coaching staff led by Mike Macdonald, who's in his second year in Seattle. He's crafted this defense that is really good at solving what the best offense is in the NFL. And that enabled them to be really competitive in their own division in the NFC West. And then certainly once they got into the playoffs. The most interesting probably part about the Seahawks is not necessarily that they're dominated by their defense. And if they do win this game on Sunday night, in large part, it's probably going to be because of the defensive game plan that put together. But they made a really big gamble, essentially, last offseason in changing their quarterback. They traded away Geno Smith, who had been their starter there for several years, and signed Sam Darnold.
Congratulations to Sam Darnold. Yeah. 2 years ago, this guy's dead. Okay?
Yeah.
This guy isn't even in conversation anymore. Career's over. Bounces around from the Niners. Then he goes to the Vikings, and he becomes the player that everybody thought he could be.
It was a risky move, right? I mean, Sam Darnold is a guy who was a former first-round pick who flamed out in New York, flamed out in Carolina, spent a year as a backup in San Francisco, and then really had a breakout year well into his career in Minnesota last season. So really what the Seahawks did is they said, we're betting that this guy is going to continue what we saw in 2024, that he's going to be able to continue building on. And that one season was not a fluke. And for the large part, they've been right. I mean, he's played really, really well. He's got one of the best deep balls, explosive downfield passing games in the NFL. And if Sam Darnold wins the Super Bowl, it's going to be a pretty kind of remarkable story for like career development. This isn't just his second chance. You could argue this is like his third or fourth chance. It's been a really interesting journey to watch that. And this is, you say it's a rematch from 2015. I mean, this is not a Seahawks team that resembles that group at all.
Neither of these teams really look like what we've known. Like, I mean, the Patriots, obviously, we know what Patriots football tends to look like, even though they've had just roster turnover so much over the years, but they've always known how to kind of fill those holes. Drake May is an MVP candidate, obviously, but he's not Tom Brady.
There's just so much turnover, right? And it's like, John Schneider, the GM of the Seahawks, like he's one of the only guys who's like still around from that era. And he's been able to completely rebuild that team. They got rid of Pete Carroll a couple of years ago. So like the identity, the kind of the culture of that team has changed a lot. Still very defensive led, but they're very much their own unit, you know. And then with the Patriots, like these are not Bill Belichick's Patriots at all.
You get a little nervous right there when you see me in the hole?
A little bit.
Yeah, good answer. Hey, we'll go down here on like the, there you go. Come on now.
I've covered a lot of Super Bowls with the Bill Belichick, Tom Brady era, the like do your job, really buttoned up Patriots. And that is not the group that I see here. And like, yes, Mike Vrabel played for Bill Belichick. He very much understands like the New England culture and like what it means to be a Patriot. But he does not coach the same way as Bill Belichick. He's hard. Like he is very demanding of his players, but he also is like, there's very much like a levity around that team.
Bill Belichick and levity. What do you mean? Like
that was not probably a word that any of us would have ever used to describe Bill Belichick. Yeah. You kind of get a sense that like, they like it, like they're having a good time. Like, and that kind of stems from Mike Vrabel.
You know what I mean? It's hard. Like how many touchdowns you guys scored last year? The answer is not enough. That's it. There's one answer. Not enough. We got to score them.
Celebrate when you score. Celebrate when you score.
And I used to always feel that like the Bill Belichick era Patriots were like the joyless pursuit of perfection. You know, it was just this like, you know, it was fun once they won. Those post-game celebrations, you know, I remember actually being in the New England locker room at that game when they beat the Seahawks, and you know, that celebration was epic, right? But it was almost like it was kind of like the relief of like, we finally did it. This was because the process did not seem very enjoyable. Part of the reason why it might be so fun is like, I think if we gave truth serum to all 53 of those guys and all their coaches, not a single one of them would have said like, we're going to be in the Super Bowl. I mean, that was not the expectations for this team, this Patriots team going into this year at all.
they're looser because they didn't have those expectations.
Yeah, they didn't know. I mean, I think they knew they had a good quarterback, right? They knew that in Drake May, they had the guy at the most important position. But I don't think back in August, anybody would have said, this guy's going to be a top 2 MVP vote getter, and we're going to be in the Super Bowl. We're going to win the AFC. I think they thought they would be competitive in their division. I think they knew that they had a guy who could kind of go toe to toe with Josh Allen in the AFC East. But to kind of get here, I think a lot of things had to break right. The thing that you're going to hear about the Patriots a lot, and the biggest knock on them, is that they played the easiest schedule in the NFL. They got a lot of their wins by beating up on bad teams, really bad opposing quarterbacks along the way. They did get some breaks in the playoffs. They played the Chargers in the first round. Justin Herbert, their quarterback, was dealing with a broken hand and a completely decimated offensive line. In the second round, CJ Stroud, the quarterback they faced, looked like much of that game that he had never really played football for. I mean, it was one of the worst quarterback performances I've seen in a postseason game. And then in the AFC Championship game, they got a Broncos team that had to start their backup quarterback because Bo Nix broke his ankle at the very end of the divisional round. So they got some breaks along the way.
Backup quarterback, former third stringer for the Patriots, who...
Yes, a former Patriots draft pick who almost pulled it off,
He almost pulled it off. I will say, going into that game, I think most people, myself included, understandably thought he had no shot. And weather not permitting, he almost did actually get that done.
Yeah, I mean, and I live in Denver, so I was at that game. I was around the Broncos the week before, and I kind of left the practices the week before the AFC Championship game, actually kind of believing that they had a shot. And they did exactly what they needed to do, as a team. And obviously the weather didn't cooperate. And Jarrett Stidham had one really bad moment. And that bad moment ultimately, cost them the game. And the sliding doors moments, what could have been. But instead, we've got the Patriots here well ahead of schedule. And we're going to get to see Drake May on this massive, massive Super Bowl stage where he's coming off of having this really incredible regular season where in so many ways he was kind of a revelation of we knew he was good as a rookie, but this year he's really been able to show just how talented he is.
This is all NFL rosters. 3rd and 2, May's got Stevenson, touchdown. First touchdown pass of the day for Drake May. Stevenson,
and not just okay, he's got a good arm. It's he really knows how to fully operate this offense. He's really dangerous as a runner with his legs.
He picks his spots as a runner really well, too.
Really, really well. I mean, that was the difference in the AFC Championship game. It was his ability to scramble. He had a couple back-breaking runs in that game. But he has not been good generally in the playoffs. So I think that's one of the most interesting dynamics in this game is that you have this really hyped second-year quarterback who's come out of probably one of the best quarterback draft classes that we've seen in a really long time, who had this great regular season, really bad playoffs. So who are we going to get? Which version of Drake May? Like, are we going to see this guy kind of ascend, take this like major leap into really being like, look, he's going to get first or second in MVP voting. My guess is second. He was second on my ballot. And that seems to be the way that this has trended with the different voting, the other awards that we've already seen. But he hasn't been good in the playoffs. So I'm just really curious to see if like the guy that we saw in the regular season is going to show up in the biggest game of his life on Sunday.
Well, and you mentioned that he will be facing the best defense in the league in the Seahawks defense. He faced one of the best defenses in the league in the Broncos as well. And obviously the weather was a huge factor here. But given how you saw him play against this Broncos defense, how much trouble do you suspect the Seahawks will give Drake May in perfect California weather?
I mean, that's really what this game in many ways is going to be. And one of the things that the Seahawks they don't have to do a lot of crazy, like exotic stuff. This isn't going to be like, if you watch the last couple Super Bowls with the Chiefs, where, Steve Spagnuolo, the Chiefs defensive coordinator, he is going to just like send all sorts of crazy like blitzes and all this kind of stuff to really like confuse a quarterback. That's not necessarily how the Seahawks play. They do a lot of disguises and try to confuse you, but they're really good with kind of just a straight up like they bring out their best 11 guys and they're just like, we're going to beat you.
And they execute.
Yeah. And they're going to challenge him at every single level. Like there are not going to be receivers running wide open. So if the Patriots are going to get their downfield passing game working, Drake May is going to have to be really accurate. Like he's not going to be able to just simply like scheme up guys wide open. So they are going to make it really, really challenging on him. I talked about the easy schedule that they faced in the playoffs in terms of opposing quarterbacks. They have faced a gauntlet of defenses so far, both with the Chargers, certainly with the Texans and the pass rush that the Texans present, and then what Denver was able to do to them. I do think it's going to take more than 10 points. They only needed 10 points to beat the Broncos last week, and their only touchdown came on that really short field after Jarrett Stidham's mistake. So one, they're going to need to take advantage if Sam Darnold has some turnover issues and makes some mistakes. And they're just going to have to be more efficient and put together like longer, better drives if they want to be able to keep up in this game.
You mentioned the strength of schedule issue. And, I think objectively, that is a fair point to bring up. It is also being brought up all the time because people, even though it's been 7 years since we've seen the Patriots in a Super Bowl, people don't want to, unless outside of New England, a lot of fans don't want to see them return to the top of the mountain. What's your objective assessment about the strength of schedule issue? I believe in the regular season, they had 2 wins against teams that were above 500. And as you said, on their road to the Super Bowl, they have played teams that had a lot of issues at quarterback and a lot of injuries.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because it's like, it's not their fault, right? Like they play who they played. It's like not their fault that the Dolphins benched Tua Tagovailoa and they got to face Quinn Ewers late in the season.
Well, and they played, like, for example, they played the Chiefs early in the season and nobody knew the Chiefs would end up being an under 500 team then.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. And like, so I guess at some points you want to look at like, okay, well then how did they perform against some of the better teams when they actually faced them? They beat Buffalo. And that was like very much a turning point in their season. I talked to a bunch of guys after the AFC Championship game and like to a man, they all pointed to like when they beat Buffalo. And that was, I don't have the schedule in front of me exactly when it was, but it was around midseason was that first game. That was the moment that they all started to realize like, oh, we're not just this little like plucky, like upstart kind of team. Like we're good. Like we're a good team and we could actually like make, do something special this year. It was really that first Buffalo game. So yeah, I mean, it's hard because it's like, they don't pick their schedule. They don't pick their opposing quarterbacks. Right. So you got to go out and, play well against the opponents that you have. And, one of the arguments for, in the MVP conversation was like, oh, well, Drake May is just like racking up touchdowns against, a Jets team that for all intents and purposes, like doesn't want to be there. So it's like, well, do we discount his stats then because they came against, bad opponents? And you can't really do that. The thing now is like, they have very much been tested at least defense versus offense, over the last month or so of the season. And they've passed all of those tests. So like, I don't think you can say that they don't deserve to be here. They just have maybe had a little bit of an unconventional path in that, like, overall, they haven't faced all of the type of adversity that a lot of times you see a Super Bowl team having done once they get to this point.
Over on the Seahawks side, you mentioned this kind of career renaissance reclamation of Sam Darnold. And it really did start in Minnesota, as you said, last year. What have you seen him adjust or change that has made him a completely different quarterback from disastrous years on the Jets?
Yeah, and it's funny because you talk to people who've like been around him, and it's so funny because they always say like he hasn't changed, that he's always kind of like been the same person. Like, but I think a lot of it is, he's a really interesting case study for like environment and how you build around a guy, how he's supported.
Again, like Seattle, just from the get, right when I got here, it felt like home, and it feels like home. And, I'm just so thankful for John and Mike believing in me, and, all the players in that locker room for believing in me. And
because I think like some of the stuff that he had issues with early in his career, like that stuff is still in there. Like it's still possible that he could go out and have a 3 interception game. He just is strung together much longer, more consistent stretches of, not having those moments where he kind of like blanks out and melts down a little bit. But the people around him, they just say he's really consistent in like his behavior and his preparation. It's like he just needed more time, and he needed like to be in the right environment. And he'll say that the year that he spent in San Francisco on Kyle Shanahan's team, when that San Francisco 49ers, so this was 2 seasons ago, this was the 2023 49ers, and that was like one of the best offenses of this quarter century.
Oh, it's Darnold trying to sneak it. He's in. Sam Darnold with his 13th career rushing touchdown.
They were so good. They were so good. They were really fun to watch. They were great by like all of the efficiency metrics, right? The way that they operated. And the fact that he got to kind of sit back that year behind Brock Purdy, who is not the most like physically gifted necessarily, quarterback, but like works really well in that system. That year was really beneficial, I think, for him. It was like very much like a reset. He got to learn a lot. He got to study a lot. And then he got into Minnesota, where Kevin O'Connell, the head coach there, he very much has this reputation of being like a quarterback's coach, like a guy who really just understands what a quarterback needs to build him up, to design the right sort of offense for him. He just has not had those like big stretches, the really big dips that he had early in his career. And I think those of us who have watched him for a long time, it's always still kind of in the back of our heads, right? Of like, is that moment coming? Like, could that happen? But the longer he keeps stringing together these like excellent games, the more you kind of think like maybe it did. Maybe he did just kind of turn the corner, and he's not going to revert back to that guy.
And they've had a couple of absolute blowouts on their road to the Super Bowl as well.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the NFC Championship game against the Rams, I mean, that was, I'm wondering if we ultimately will like look back at the end of the season and be like, yeah, that was actually the Super Bowl. Like that was the game. Those were the best 2 teams, the most interesting kind of schematic coaching matchup, the quarterback matchup that we wanted. And Darnold was at his very best in that game. He was excellent. They would not have won that NFC Championship game without him being like at his very, very best. And a lot of this is a credit to Mike McDonald and the defense for what they did to the Niners in 2 games late in the season, including the first round of their first playoff game in the divisional round, just scoring so many. I mean, they were just like throttling opposing teams.
What did the Seahawks do to build around him, give him protection? Kind of, they already had a little bit of that in place, obviously, but they really did bring him in. And as you said, kind of saw that they were able to cultivate around him what they kind of already had.
One of the big issues over the last 10 years of Seahawks football was they don't have an offensive line. They can't protect. Russell Wilson complained about it all the time. About,
Sam Darnold's kind of never really had a great offensive line around him anyway, by the way.
Yeah, but they, I think their offensive line has largely been really good. So he's been given some good protection. And then they've had, really had this breakout year from Jackson Smith-Njigba. He was a guy who, when he was coming out of Ohio State, first round pick, but he was kind of like a controversial pick just from like a football standpoint. He's kind of like this tweener guy. Like he wasn't like a clear number one X receiver. He wasn't necessarily like a slot guy. He wasn't like their wide receiver one in 2024, but they really like figured out some unique ways to use Smith and Jigba. And one of the other, I mean, I talked about Darnold, the kind of the big move they made to, go after and get Sam Darnold, get rid of Geno Smith. They also got rid of DK Metcalf last offseason. They traded DK away to Pittsburgh, and that really allowed JSN to become, true wide receiver one. Jackson Smith and Jigba has just been like a revelation this season. I mean, he's going to win some big awards at the NFL honors, I expect. He's all pro, potentially offensive player. I think I voted for him. He was my offensive player of the year. The one kind of concern is like, they don't really have a great running game in Seattle. And that's what they want to do. Like you talk to any of their coaches and they're like, our offensive philosophy is like, we're going to run the ball. We're going to run the ball really well. We're going to run the ball consistently. And that's going to be like the foundation of our offense. But it's not actually something that they do all that well. They're able to kind of hit it in spots with Kenneth Walker. So it's like been kind of interesting. They've been able to have this like really good offense for stretches of the season without having a real consistent running game. A lot of ways that's a credit to Darnold and being able to hit those explosives and the connection that he's had with JSN.
Well, and if you want any more evidence that this is not your mother's Seahawks team, it's that they don't have a robust running game.
Yeah, this is not the Marshawn Lynch. Like if they get, I mean, everybody wants to talk about the Super Bowl from 11 years ago, but like there's not going to be like a controversy of like, obviously you give the ball to Kenneth Walker. This isn't like a Marshawn Lynch. You have, one of the most like dominant running backs and, consistent running games in the NFL.
Yeah.
Although if we get to like a 1 yard line, goal line play, it'd be rich.
Well, so along those lines, like big picture here, is there conversation about redemption for the Seahawks team, given that neither of these teams have anything in common with the teams that played 11 years ago?
The first Super Bowl we ever covered was Super Bowl 49 in Arizona, and that was Seattle versus New England. And here we are today with Seattle versus New England, and the circumstances could not be more different this time around than the last time around.
Yeah, I think it's only like a media narrative, like
a manufactured narrative.
Yeah, I mean, the players don't care at all. I mean, look, it was 11 years ago. A lot of those players don't really remember it. Like if they were children.
A lot of those players were not in high school yet.
I know, like I'm like, I was there. I was a fully formed adult, at that Super Bowl. But yeah, it's not something that like the players and certainly the coaches are thinking about. I did see Mike McDonald on media night, got a lot of questions about the like, would you run the ball? What would you call, all this stuff? And he was over it. They were not into those storylines at all. But yeah, I mean, there's very few people on the Seahawks staff. John Schneider, the GM, is kind of like the one guy there. And then on the Patriots side, offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels is just about the only guy. I mean, there's other people like in the building for sure, but like Josh McDaniels is really the only guy who was like a big role on that Patriots team. And he has like since left and then now come back to New England. But one of the only guys that actually like had a big hand in that game.
With this Patriots team that, in years past, we've just been used to having perennially in the playoffs, certainly in the Super Bowl, obviously with their dynasty teams, there was a lot of talk about there being more of a rebuilding period than we actually ended up getting with them, all told. What would it mean in football circles if the Patriots were able to return to the top of the mountain with really 2, maybe 3 rebuilding years under their belt?
It's got to be brutal if you're a fan of like 31 other franchises, maybe 30. I don't think like if you're like a Chiefs fan, I don't think you can be, you can maybe be sad about watching Patrick Mahomes get injured, but like, or maybe like the Eagles, like there's maybe, I guess, 29 other teams. You just have to be like, are you kidding me? These guys? Again, we did this for 20 years and we're doing this again. So yeah, I mean, I think there's like from a lot of the rest of the league, you got to kind of be like, can we catch a break? Like, what are we doing? We're cycling through quarterback after quarterback and head coach after head coach. And, the Patriots had those 5 years. It must have been so hard for all those people in Boston, those kindergartners who never got a parade, you got to.
I was saying this to someone the other day because I remember when before the Red Sox won the World Series in 2004, they hadn't won in 86 years. So you had all of these, we didn't call them memes at the time. And for the life of me, Lindsay, I can't remember what we actually called them, but we had some version of memes in 2004. But you would have all of these posts and articles and, grandma would be interviewed and she would be 85 years old and she had never seen a World Series in her lifetime. And then they won in 2004 and they won again, I want to say in either 07 or 08. And then you had memes of 3-year-olds who had never seen a Red Sox. Yeah. And this is what we have now with the Patriots. We've got 5-year-olds, 5 and 6-year-olds who just do not remember. They have never experienced this in their lifetime. And it's been absolute heartbreak.
It is an interesting, because while the Belichick Brady Patriots were going to the Super Bowl year after year after year, they did have that little pocket. They had a couple of years there in the late 2000s, 2010s where there was a little drought there, but they were the villain. Right? You couldn't look away. You were always paying attention to what they did, but they had cheating scandals along the way. Tom Brady was one of the biggest celebrities, crossover beyond sports in the world. You loved him if you were in New England and you kind of hated him if you were everywhere else. And that is not really the vibe of this Patriots team right now. Look, if you're a fan of the Jets.
If you're a fan of the Jets, you are hating both of these matchups. I mean, Sam Darnold was not this Sam Darnold when he was drafted by the Jets.
This is probably going to be really, really hard to watch, right? If you're a Vikings fan, probably going to be really hard to watch Sam Darnold in the Super Bowl. But if you're just it's hard to not like Drake May. He's everybody's little brother. He's got this sweet wife that he's been dating since middle school who likes to bake. And who doesn't like Mike Vrabel? He's not a Belichick type at all. He's headbutting his players. He's crushing beers with them in the locker room. You like Mike Vrabel. It's a different vibe. I think you can kind of be it's the Patriots again. But when you're around him here this week, and I think when you watch him, it doesn't feel like that era of the Patriots. Obviously there's the Kraft family is still there. Robert Kraft, when they moved on from Bill Belichick, super, super messy. He had a succession plan in place with Gerard Mayo, ended up not working out. And they realized it pretty quickly. It wasn't the right fit. I think Kraft feels pretty bad about that. And they had a chance to get the right coach, the perfect coach for them. And they went ahead and made that change pretty quickly. So there's a lesson in kind of realizing that you made the wrong decision and fixing it quickly and not kind of letting the ego take over and ride it out and prove that you were right. But ultimately, it's about the right coach and the right quarterback. And that's what the Patriots did.
What does it say that Mike Vrabel is the right coach?
I think he would have been the right coach in a lot of places. And he was the hottest coaching candidate, or one of the 2 hottest coaching candidates last cycle, the 2025 cycle, for a good reason. He's really experienced. I don't know if there's anybody better at winning on the margins of just really understanding the rule book, the game management, the little things it takes to win. I don't think it should be understated how important it is that he kind of gets the Patriots though, and gets what that fan base needs, what it takes to kind of win in that building, to come in and not be intimidated by the 6 previous championships and the aura of Belichick. He's Patriots way adjacent, but he's not part of Belichick's coaching tree. I thought that was really important, an important distinction. He played for Bill Belichick, but he never was part of his coaching lineage. He really was able to come up as a coach on his own. He coaches like he played, which is relentless effort, incredible intensity, intense focus on details, knowing every single thing that needs to be going on in the game. And it really just ended up being kind of the culture fit that they needed. This doesn't necessarily stack up to what you would usually consider to be a Super Bowl caliber roster. So they needed to be coached up. And that was something that Mike Vrabel was very much able to do, to get the most out of a team that was young, or maybe just not quite as talented as you would have hoped at this point.
Well, Lindsay, at this point, do you have any predictions? What do you expect to see on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Seahawks have been the best team, or one of the 2 best teams in the league, for almost the entire season. So I think the way that when you look at most of the matchups, it feels like Seattle should win. I will say New England's defense has been getting better, playing its best at the right time. They've been playing their best throughout this postseason for sure. And they're very much coming to this game with the chip on their shoulder. They've been really good at getting pressure in the postseason, and they've been exceptional at forcing turnovers in the postseason. So that is the one thing that could kind of swing swing this game, I think, in New England's favor. I feel like Seattle is going to win. They probably should win by all of the, all of the metrics. It's just going to be like, is something weird going to happen? We talked about that little thing in the back of your head about Sam Darnold. Is he going to have that 3 turnover game? Drake May's legs cannot be the X factor if, all of the other coverage is impeccable. I think it'll be competitive. Both of these teams play a lot of really competitive games. New England is not a team that's been getting blown out at all this season. You could probably chalk some of that up to the level of competition that they played. But I think a Mike Vrabel team is going to be prepared and is going to be ready. I just think ultimately Seattle has the talent that should win out in this game.
It's going to be really fun to watch. Not so fun is every time you and I do a Super Bowl preview, we have to talk about really not fun off the field issues. But I'm glad that I have someone in you that I can talk about it and not ignore it. Stephon Diggs on the New England Patriots in December was arrested and is now facing felony charges of strangulation and assault, among other things, for an altercation he had with his personal chef.
Now, New England Patriots wide receiver Stephon Diggs facing criminal charges, including felony strangulation or suffocation, misdemeanor assault, and battery.
We have seen assault and violence issues like this before in the NFL, and normally a player like Stephon Diggs would be placed on the commissioner's exempt list, which would make him ineligible to play in the Super Bowl, but he is on the roster and suiting up. Are people talking about this, first of all? Is this something that people are discussing at the Super Bowl when most people just want to focus on the game?
Yeah, not really. And I do feel like I've over the course of my career, in all the different places I've worked, I feel like I've done a lot of the talking about it.
Sure.
And so there's a bit of me that feels like, wait, I'm not talking about this enough. Like, it feels like a very classic, 2026, the times that we are living in, where we're just not going to care about powerful men doing,
or precedent, how we usually handle these things institutionally. And
yeah. And I mean, the biggest question is that what you brought about the commissioner's exempt list is this feels like a classic case for when they would apply it and why it was created. And it has not been applied that way. And one of my biggest questions or concerns about the personal conduct policy and the commissioner's exempt list since in the post Ray Rice era, which now we're looking at
12 years. Yeah.
2014, I believe, was when all the policies and stuff were rewritten, is that it was just very inconsistently applied. And the commissioner was given pretty broad latitude to decide when and how to use it. And one of the way that the policy has been written is that it's there to be used when a player is arrested or has pending criminal charges involving violent crimes against women, child abuse. There's a lot of things in there. Over the last 5 years or so, there have been a number of situations where a player has been accused in civil court of sexual assault, of sexual misconduct outside of criminal proceedings. And the NFL never put Deshaun Watson on the commissioner exempt list. Justin Tucker never went on a commissioner's exempt list because these were all things that were being handled in a civil court. So, remember with Deshaun Watson, there was a grand jury. The grand jury declined to present criminal charges. And that was when the trade happened and all, he was kind of able to resume his career and all of that stuff. And then ultimately he was suspended after that under the personal conduct policy. But it's been a while since the commissioner has really used the exempt list. There was no Stephon Diggs perp walk, but look, he has an arraignment. It's just a little unclear to me why it's just been nope, it's fine. Everything will just be delayed till after the Super Bowl. And to me, it's just kind of another sign of this was something that we cared a lot about for an era in time. And now there's other things that have taken precedence. So it definitely feels weird. I mean, Stephon Diggs is one of the media darlings here. Look, he's dating Cardi B. They're at the Super Bowl. He got at media night, a lot of people want to talk to him about his favorite Cardi B songs. But it does feel weird and gross and is something that I hope as a collective media, we don't let go over the course of the next week or so.
If he plays a big role in this game on Sunday, what do you think the conversation's going to be like?
Yeah, I mean, I think there will be places and I think there will be outlets that are going to be this feels wrong. This is weird,
we've all kind of benefited from the fact that he's been kind of quiet, on the field in since at least through January.
Yeah. He hasn't been their defining performer. And part of that is the offense hasn't played well as a whole. But I'll be very curious to see how big of a part of the game plan he is now. I mean, this is certainly not apples to apples, but I remember, the Super Bowl, the 20 2019 Super Bowl and 2020, where it was like, Tyreek Hill is going to be like the guy, and like it feeling gross.
You and I had to do a completely separate episode about that.
He was not on the commissioner's exempt list, and he was one of the stars, the biggest, had like arguably the biggest play of the game in that Super Bowl. And there's certainly that possibility that could happen with Stefon Diggs.
As of taping this, we are currently taping this on Tuesday. We got some Hall of Fame voting controversy directly involving one of these teams. So obviously last week it was leaked that Bill Belichick will not be making it into the Hall of Fame on his first ballot. Just today, the news broke that neither will Robert Kraft.
Bill Belichick will not be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Sources telling our Seth Wickersham and Don Van Natta Jr. that Belichick fell short of the 40 out of 50 votes needed for induction. He got the news on Friday. He was said to be, quote, puzzled.
You are a voter. You are a former president of the Professional Football Writers Association. First, just generally your reaction, your thoughts. If you want to tell me how you voted, you can, on these two men not making it into the Hall of Fame on their first ballot.
I feel like I'm rarely stunned anymore. Like I've been doing this a long time. I'm pretty cynical about a lot of stuff. When that Belichick news broke last week, I was legitimately, that was like oh my God, I cannot believe this. They're very much, we cannot talk about what happened in the meeting, who said what discussions were like, all of that sort of stuff. I will say I did not leave voting thinking that there was any way that Bill Belichick wasn't getting in. So I was very surprised. And both of our former colleague, Mike Sando from The Athletic, has done a really good job of kind of pulling back the curtain a bit on the voting process itself. And when you kind of really kind of pull back those layers, you can understand how it happens. I think we were all kind of aware that the way that the process works and the straight up math, and look, I'm not good at math. And, if you try to ask me percentages and how you divide up votes and all this stuff, I'm not going to be able to do that advanced analytics for you.
Just to kind of on a basic level, break that down for our listeners. So one, Football Hall of Fame voting is different than some of the other leagues because it's not just the writers, it's the writers and football people, former GMs and people.
Yeah, it's 50 voters. I would say it's probably about 45 media members. Some people have been voters for 25, 30 years. This is my 5th year that I've been a selector. And then there's a handful of broadcasters who are former players or former coaches, Dan Fouts, Tony Dungy, James Lofton, and then Bill Polian, the former GM of the Colts and the Bills, is also a voter. And then there's a couple others, there's a historian who's on a league historian who's on the panel now, somebody from NFL Films. But yeah, it's only 50 people. There's a cut down process throughout the year that we're, kind of winnowing it down from a really large pool of people who are eligible down to, I think it goes to 50 and then 20 and then 15. And then ultimately we meet as a panel, the 50 of us. In January, we have 15 modern era candidates that we discuss, and then we have a group of 5. So really what we're talking about right now is this other group of 5. So we're going to find out on Thursday of the modern candidates. It's guys like Drew Brees, Larry Fitzgerald, Terrell Suggs, the modern era candidates.
We shouldn't get too many surprises on that end of things.
Yeah, I mean, the way that the voting rules, which I'll discuss here, it's also making those classes smaller as well. It's making it much harder for the modern candidate guys to get in as well.
Well, so that's when you talk about the math, one of the main things is a lot of voters perhaps having to choose between the guys that, they think are definite locks who might not need their votes and the guys that they think might be bubble guys that could use their vote that they do believe should get in. And that's kind of a calculus that the voters have to make.
Yeah. So for the last 2 seasons, the Hall of Fame, we do not, as voters, we don't set the voting process. We are kind of told, hey, this is what we're doing. Our board of directors, our trustees, we have voted this is what we're doing now. So for the last 2 years, the big change was that, so there's a coaches subcommittee where that group of 10 people talks about all of the coaches candidates, votes on one who comes out. He is the coach finalist. There's a contributor committee. And I was on that committee this year for the contributor where we all talk. There's a whole bunch of finalists. That committee is really interesting, or that process, because it's we're talking about owners, we're talking about broadcasters, we're talking about, statisticians. It is a really diverse group of people who it's hard to really compare their resumes. One person comes out of there. And then there's a senior committee where that's talking about players who have been long retired, didn't get in when they were eligible as a modern era candidate. And this is kind of their last chance to get in. So as of 2 years ago, the Hall lumped those guys together. So it's the coach, the contributor, and 3 senior candidates. And we get to vote for 3 of the 5. To get in, you have to get 80% of the votes. So that's 40 out of 50 votes. That's really hard. I mean, you have to really have consensus, essentially. And last year, the first year of this process, the coach finalist, who is Mike Holmgren, did not get in. I was stunned. I was really surprised. And honestly, I was disappointed that he didn't get in. And so only one person came out of that group of 5, and that was Sterling Sharp last year. He was one of the senior finalists. I fully assumed that Bill Belichick was getting in. I voted for him. I
mean, we don't need to go through all the stats and the winning percentage and what he actually meant to that team. I mean, we Patriots hater or not, the conversation isn't, is Bill Belichick a Hall of Famer? It's by how much is he the greatest coach of all time in the modern era?
Yeah. And it's not simply oh, look, he has 6 Super Bowl rings. It's yes, he won a lot. He created the greatest dynasty in football history, best defensive game planner of his era, of maybe any era. I think that was pretty clear. But I really think that the process that was put in place 2 years ago, it very much set the table for this sort of thing to happen. I thought it was much more likely that it would happen and it would keep Kraft out, not Belichick out. What we've seen is reportedly, and we don't know, and I will say, I will make this clear, when we complete voting, we do not know the results. We are not told the results of the voting until a couple hours. So I don't know who the modern class is. I know who the final 7 were. I know who was on my ballot, but I don't know how any of my other fellow selectors voted on the modern candidates. A lot of us are seeing each other in San Francisco this week, and we're having a lot of oh my God, what's going on? But yeah, I mean, I think what's going to come out of this is a lot of discussion from the Hall about the process, the changes to the voting process that they made. Do they need to change the threshold? Is it 80%? Does it go down to 75%? Do you pull the coach and the contributor out from the senior candidate, the senior pool? Because ultimately, I think what's happening is that, our mission, right, as selectors on the Hall of Fame committee is to put the very best of the best in Canton. And that's a really hard process, right? Because once guys get to the room, we call it the room, the meeting room to discuss, everybody there is worthy. You don't sneak into that top 15 by accident. You have to make some really, really difficult decisions. But I think now the way that the votes are getting, you really have to kind of it's a 0-sum game, right? You're having to split a lot of votes, and it's keeping people who are very clearly Hall of Famers and worthy of being enshrined out.
Yeah, if Bill Belichick's not a Hall of Famer, nobody's a Hall of Famer.
I think what's happening here is that having to choose between voting for coach, contributor, or seniors, there's a lot of voters, many more than I expected. And that's what I've been learning these last few days, that are I am voting for the senior candidates. It is all about the players. So it's, that they're almost always going to vote for players over people who were not on the field. And the further you were away from on the field, so it's players primary, coaching secondary, and then it's going to be a really, really high bar, I think, for some people to vote for anybody coming out of the contributor category. Seems to be the case. And that's something that I think the Hall is really going to have to grapple with over the next couple of months. And, I think as voters, we'll probably get to have our say, and we're going to get to talk about it. But I think there's just going to be a lot of fallout and a lot of changes to come, whether that's to who the voting panel is, what the process is going to be. I think this is just if you're into Hall of Fame politics, I think this is kind of a moment that is just going to shake a lot of stuff up.
Well, and I know you probably can't say a whole lot about this, but there has been some public reporting suggesting that there might have been a personal element here, that some people in the room either felt that Bill Belichick was a Hall of Famer, but shouldn't have made it in on the first ballot. I believe the word that was used was penance, serving penance, a year penance for his role in Spygate and Deflategate. Now, our former colleague and wonderful reporter Mike Sando has directly interviewed Bill Polian was specifically the person who was pointed at as perhaps being that person. And Mike Sando has reported that Polian completely denies that being the case, obviously without pointing directly to a specific person. Do you think that there could have been a personal element here? Bill Belichick didn't make a lot of friends. Robert Kraft is a very divisive figure within the football world as well.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I can't like specifically talk about like what was discussed in the meeting. That word penance, like a punishment type of thing, to my recollection, never happened. I don't think anybody was like holding a grudge against him. And look, it's very clear what we're supposed to vote on, and your own personal interactions with a player or a coach is not supposed to be part of it. So, I can't speak for the other 49 people on the panel. I would be very surprised, though, given how serious all of us take this and, respect the position that we're in, that anybody would let like Bill Belichick being kind of a jerk to the media influence their decision there. I think the Spygate stuff is legit. The concerns about the cheating scandals that he was involved in and was punished for by the league, I think that's legit, but that's different than he was rude to me.
And finally, Lindsay, I wanted to talk football with you because you're the best at it. Have you seen any ICE presence on the ground in the Bay Area while you've been there?
I have not. I think there's been like, you see a lot of like kind of security type stuff, but I have not seen any sort of like specific. For
context, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, is always around the Super Bowl, so that wouldn't be out of the ordinary.
Yeah, and I haven't. I mean, there was not like I didn't see anything around like the media night convention center, and I haven't spent a ton of time like out walking around. So yeah, I mean, what like the NFL is saying, and this is I asked Roger Goodell about this at his press conference on Monday, was like, would there specifically be like ICE enforcement efforts around the Super Bowl? Because DHS has indicated throughout the last several months, really since Bad Bunny was announced as the halftime show performer, that they wanted to like have an ICE presence at the Super Bowl.
Corey Lewandowski said in October that ICE agents would be conducting immigration enforcement at the game.
Benny, there is nowhere that you can provide safe haven to people who are in this country illegally, not the Super Bowl and nowhere else. We will find you. We will apprehend you. We will put you in a detention facility and we will deport you. So know that is a very real situation under this administration.
They've sent ICE agents to Italy for the Milano Cortina game. So it's a fair question to ask for sure.
Yeah. And I think, there's been reporting this week that like, from kind of San Francisco officials, not something that will be happening here in San Francisco. But it's definitely something that I'm like on alert for and being really sensitive to. There's always like a very large security presence around the Super Bowl, but not a security presence in like, please show me your papers. Like, you are not white, so I'm going to stop you on the street and think you should not be allowed to go to the Super Bowl or be around the Super Bowl or work at the Super Bowl. So, I really hope that doesn't become something that's happening here. I mean, but I will just say I have not physically seen anything like that. I think it's been very interesting that the performers that the NFL has chosen for this stage.
Well, we're going to talk about Bad Bunny for sure.
Yeah, but it's not just Bad Bunny. It's also Green Day and Brandi Carlile. It's like, this is like welcome to the resistance NFL moment. Like
I will say when the Green Day thing was announced, my immediate, very cynical mind was, well, they wanted a white band and an older kind of, established white band to kind of counteract Spanish speaking Bad Bunny over here. But if they, like, all of Green Day's songs are about the resistance and about anti-conservatism, and they've reworked one of their protest songs that was about George W. Bush and the Iraq War to be about Donald Trump. Now, that being said, the NFL doesn't do anything without having final say, but they have given a whole lot of power and leeway to Jay-Z to choose these performers.
Yeah, I mean, and they kind of have stood by. There's never been a moment, at least publicly, that they've like wavered in the selection of Bad Bunny. I mean, look, I will say they didn't pick Bad Bunny or like greenlight Jay-Z's decision to pick Bad Bunny because they necessarily agree with his anti-ICE platform.
He's the most popular.
He's the biggest global artist in the world. And the NFL's number one initiative, their number one priority is becoming like the biggest sport in the world and attracting a global audience. So they very much care more about what having Bad Bunny performing on their stage means for their global audience than they do about the people who are going to be tuning out so that they can watch Kid Rock on some other, low budget halftime show.
I keep making this point to people who don't know as well as you and I do really how the NFL works, because there's understandably, a sense that the NFL, its owners, its leadership do vote a certain way. They do hold their own politics, of course, but the thing that they care about the most is the bottom line and is money. And for an NFL that is trying to take over the world, that is trying to expand globally, that has games in Mexico, it probably wouldn't be a good look for Latino people to be rounded up at the Super Bowl this year.
I'm just going to be very curious what those performances look like and like, what is Bad Bunny going to do? I'm very excited. I'm excited to see it. If maybe the Grammys were a little indication of like how he's choosing to use his platform.
Before I say thanks to God, I'm going to say eyes out. We're not savage, we're not animals, we're not aliens, we are humans, and we are Americans. Also,
I think it could just be like a really big, kind of an important moment. And, Roger Goodell, I asked him about this on Monday, and he said he thought that Bad Bunny knew the platform that he was on at the Grammys and like how to use that platform. And the Super Bowl tends to be a place about uniting people. Given everything we know about Bad Bunny and how he speaks and how he uses his platforms, I would be shocked if he gets up there and is like, that just would feel very out of character.
I will remind everyone that when the Super Bowl was in Miami in 2020, and, this was the last year of Trump's first administration, the performers were J-Lo and Shakira, and J-Lo came out draped in an American flag and turned it around, and it was a Puerto Rican flag. So I think we can probably expect some kind of Super Bowl halftime demonstration from Bad Bunny.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, and we had, Kendrick's performance last year is like, we all very much remember it because of, him calling Drake a pedophile, the Super Bowl halftime show, which was just an incredible performance. But there was also very much a political statement in there. He turned his performers into an American flag and said, you picked revolutionarily televised, you picked the wrong guy. There was definitely like a political undertones to that performance as well. And I don't think I've ever watched the pregame music at the Super Bowl. I'm going to be watching Green Day for sure, and I will be locked in to that halftime show for sure.
Lindsay, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for joining us. I always love talking to you, especially before Super Bowl. I know how crazy this week is. I hope you get a couple of hours of sleep at least.
I'll sleep next week. It's fine.
There you go. It should be a really fun Sunday, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning into Sportly. Tune in next week and every week after as we dive into another great story. And if you like what you're hearing, rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Sportly is an Immigrantly Media production. This episode was produced by Paroma Chakravarti. Our executive producer is Sadia Khan. Our sound designer and editor is Paroma Chakravarti. Our theme music was created by Simon Hutchinson. Other music is by Epidemic Sound. Tune back in next week and every week after for more Sportly.